Good morning. Welcome back to Passionate World Radio Network. Distinguish yourself from the ordinary. And this morning we're continuing with interviewing authors from the International Miami Book Festival that's being held in downtown Miami, Florida, on November 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. And this morning we have Robert Hicks, who wrote the book, The Orphan Mother. But it's not quite what you think it is. It takes place during Reconstruction. So good morning, Robert. How are you today?
Well, I'm great. In fact, I have to tell you, I'm on this extensive 29-city book tour. And so this morning I'm at the Monteleone Hotel in New Orleans, so I'm especially great. I love New Orleans. My second book took place here. So I'm happy.
I'm glad you're happy. My first book tour was in New Orleans when I was promoting Teenagers of the Bewildered Parents Guide. It's a wonderful city.
Wow, it is. It's a great place to be.
So what persuaded you to write about the Reconstruction era? Because practically no one really has approached it in the manner that you approached it.
You know, the truth is that's the reason. I didn't know anything about it. I had written a book called The Widow of the South, and one of the characters in this book was this enslaved woman. And so I wanted to know more about what might have happened to her life afterward. And I also wanted to know more about what Reconstruction was like. Basically, I was clueless. I didn't know that there were 2 years after the Civil War, there really wasn't any Reconstruction, and that it didn't happen immediately. I didn't know how long it lasted. I didn't know what it entailed. And so it was one of the real pleasures of writing literary fiction or historic fiction is when you can actually learn something yourself.
Absolutely. And you wrote about a person's life, a black person's life, and how the death of her one son affected the rest of her life.
Exactly, which I think, of course, is the logical thing to happen. And I wanted to write. I want to tell you this, Lillian. My really strong emphasis was I wanted to write about all those voiceless people, and I'm not just talking about formerly enslaved woman in the South, although I am talking about not just her, but I'm talking about really maybe all the formerly enslaved women in the South. But I'm also talking about some mother who's putting her children to sleep right now in Syria in a camp, or I'm talking about people who are trying to be heard and understood in this world, who are having a very hard time doing it. And that's what I wanted to write about. I have seen these people. I've been around these people all my life, people, whether white or black, who are simply trying to be heard. And I wanted to kind of almost celebrate their lives, that these people that overcome all sorts of circumstances, and in the end, I don't mean without loss. They have huge loss. She loses her son, but in the end, that they somehow triumph. And that's the story of Mariah Reddy, that she is able, despite lost love, despite loss of her son, a different form of love, despite all of it, that she somehow triumphs in the end.
And I think, too, what I found about your book was that these were people, women basically, who were already defeated by their own husbands way before their husbands and lovers or sons or whatever marched off to war. They were already at a disadvantage. And so you had to kind of look at your book as it was their liberation as well.
Exactly. I mean, and again, how many mothers and wives are right now in camps somewhere in the world, and in the Middle East or in Europe? How many people are living in the most meager of circumstances in America or in South America or Central America or wherever, who somehow are able to triumph And again, I'm not saying they end up with a Cadillac. I'm saying that they end up with a rich and valuable life. And sometimes I think we ignore that. And so that's Mariah Reddick. I mean, she has had the worst of things happen. I don't think there would be anything worse than a mother losing her son. And yet she somehow is able to triumph over it.
I think that in her cave she has let in some light. And as she pushed further aside the walls of the cave or the roof of the cave or whatever you want to within her dark enclosure, she let in more light. And that is a choice that everybody makes, whether consciously or self-consciously.
Absolutely. And I mean, you got the story. I mean, I want people to see her at the end. My publisher asked me 4.5 years ago. I'm not one of those people that can mill these things out every 9 months. I wish I could. But 4.5 years ago, my publisher said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want people to read it who have very comfortable lives, and by the end of the book, A, hopefully want it not to end, and B, want to look at her and say, gosh, what a rich life she had." And because, of course, if you look at her circumstances, there's nothing you can say. She's eating cold biscuits. She's having and yet I think her life proclaims some kind of triumph over everything that's happened to her.
Actually, what I see for her, instead of like her former mistress who keeps a graveyard full of dead soldiers, dead boys, resting places for those who fell during the war, so parents and relatives know that their loved ones have been taken care of, I see her more tending to the garden of the living, of those who have triumphed and is moving forward, but is also tending them and going to them and saying, yes, you can do this, yes, and have the encouragement and the inspiration to draw upon her own experience to keep nudging them forward.
Hey, would you be willing to go on book tour with me?
Yeah.
I love what you just said, and I've never expressed it as well as you just did. That's exactly it. She is looking to the future. She is looking to do something for her son, who she has lost, that will affect people well into the future. And the second, there are two things going on in this book. One is the macro issue, which is that she wants to be heard. She wants to be heard at a time when not just women of color, but just women aren't supposed to be heard. She wants to speak before a tribunal, a military tribunal that's been set up during Reconstruction to investigate the death of her son and another boy. And she wants to speak to them. And so that's one of the issues. But there's a micro issue with this book, which is that she also wants to separate herself from Carrie McGavick, her former mistress, and yet still really be her friend and let Carrie really be her friend. And she wants Carrie to learn how to stop trying to treat her like a child, like she is a slave, like she is someone that Carrie has to maternalistically take care of. And so there's a balance in there because there's ways in which Carrie can help her. And yet at the same time, she has to become her own woman. And Mariah is a strong woman. And so those are the two big issues taking place in the book as she's trying to find herself in this world.
Well, it's also an issue, it brings to mind two things. One, that the tribunal that she finds herself in front of, wasn't that the same thing when they brought down to find out who killed the two blacks and the white worker that went down there to volunteer? And then the second was, you're not just asking Mariah Carey to change her opinion of black people, you're asking a whole society and continent that has been educated and brainwashed that it is the whites who, after all, are the superior, and that it is in their best interest to look after these dark-skinned people because they do not have the capacity or the mentality to be adults. And so you're asking a whole generation that's been brought up on this from the beginning of the Revolutionary War up to the Civil War to reconsider that maybe they have erred in how they've treated a fellow man.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is the great struggle that we have to this day. You know, I can't say his name, an important person who's a friend of mine who's quite big at CBS turned to me and had read the book, and he said he came to a luncheon and he said, I have to tell you something. He goes, you know what this book is? He goes, it's that Black Lives Matter. And I turned and I said, you know what it really is? It's that Black lives have always mattered. That I'm trying to talk about something that started a long time ago, and sometimes out of just evil, but sometimes out of wanting to be kind and good, that people need to be treated with worth and value, whoever they are, whatever the color of their skin is, or their origin, or whatever. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say that I'm writing a story that I hope is as relevant today as it would have been during Reconstruction. And
it still is, and it always will be, because man himself always draws that line in the sand, and determining what their race is, what their religion is, that
right. and
makes or breaks it. Yes.
It is, exactly. And so what we hopefully have by the end of this book is at least in these lives, at least in Carrie and Mariah Reddick's lives and the rest of them, these people have learned something very valuable. These people have been able to transcend all their circumstances. You know, this woman has such a powerful life by the end, in her own way, and yet her circumstances are still just nothing.
But
you know,
yeah.
So anyway, that's what I'm trying to do, and you
did it with me. I can't talk for the rest of the world, but you did it with me.
You're awful kind. Well, my offer for you to go out on the book tour with me is pretty good. But that whole little thing you said, I was like, wow.
I'll send you the stream. You can memorize it, and then you can use it. How's that?
But I better give you credit, okay?
Okay, although people take my words. They say, hey, I really like what you just said. You don't mind if I steal this? Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, right ahead.
Well,
okay.
I'm willing to give credit. I mean, you know, I am. But yeah, it's been really nice, and because you know there are a lot of issues in this day and time, and you know, is it appropriate for a 60-year-old white man living in the 21st century to write in the voice of a freed woman of color living in the 19th century? And you know, I have tried to connect with her through my humanness and through her humanness, and it's up to the readers to decide if I was able to succeed at that. But that was my goal. I have a high level of empathy, which sometimes I dislike in myself. I put down my dog a week ago today, and my dog, who was 17 and a half years old, and so the empathy has not played in my favor. I was doing an event before several hundred people in New York on Saturday, and I began to break down because, you know, I was so filled with, you know, the sorrow over this dog. But that's the same empathy that has given me the ability over the years to be able to hopefully understand something of what it is to be, a woman who loses a child, or in this case, a woman of color, or whatever it is.
I understand. And Robert, we're just ran out of time. So, folks, we're going to have Robert tell you where you can find him at the International Miami Book Fair, if not the exact time, whether he's on any panels, he's doing any readings, he's doing any signings. And then we're also going to ask him where they can find you on the World Wide Web.
Okay. They can find me on the World Wide Web. That's a little easier for me.
Okay.
They can find me, at roberthicks.com. So it's pretty simple. I will be I'll be speaking on the historical novel panel at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, November 19th at the fair, and I am so excited about doing that and being there. I've only been to the fair once before with the Wit of the South, and I just it was great. I'll be appearing with Stephanie Dre and with Laura Kamole and with Irene Renee. I'm trying to read this. Each of the authors.
That's okay. I've already interviewed some of them.
Okay, good. Well, and I apologize for not pronouncing their names. But each of us will have 20 minutes, which is really exciting for me. And then we'll do some question and answer. So I look forward to being with you guys down there. I love Miami. I grew up in Palm Beach County. We spent our winters in Palm Beach County when I was growing up, and so I'm excited to be back down there. And the food, by the way, in Miami is a lot better than it was when I was a kid. I'm
glad to hear that.
It is. The Cuban influence was a really positive thing to have to the food, the cuisine, and all the other things. Anyway, it's been great being with you guys.
Well, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, historical readers, you can hear this interview all over again at Passionate World Radio Network, Facebook.com/PWR Network, and Twitter.com/CAULDWELL. And before you go away, F.D. Huntington had this to say: while reason is puzzling itself about mystery, faith is turning it to daily bread and feeding on it thankfully in her heart of hearts. Thank you all very much for listening, and don't forget, join us down at the International Miami Book Fair, November 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th, and come and see Robert Hicks. Thank you all very much for listening, and remember, please keep listening. Thank you.
Thank you.